What is going on, everybody? My name is Ciara Lawler. Welcome back to another week of Hero or Zero here on the Heroes for Hire podcast. We are back again talking one comic book character, as we do every single week. We talk their good points and their bad points, so we generally just give you a bit of a rundown of everything to do with that character. Now, I am not joined as always by my best pal, Mr. Shaun, and he is not here this week. He's just away. We haven't had a massive falling out other than, the usual rivalries that we have. But yeah, so he will be back next week, not to worry. But I decided this week I was going to go solo. And we're going to talk about, obviously, a Batman villain. Whenever I get to talk about Solo, I get to go hard at that. And he's not going to be happy with me because we're talking about, you've seen from the title, one of the Clayfaces. A character that the two of us love, and I know that is heavily rumoured to be involved in Matt Reeves' Batman sequel. So I thought I'd be interested in maybe bring it up, have a little chat here. And it's a confusing history in all of the Clayfaces, so I thought it'd be pretty good if we tried to get into it in some way. If this is your first episode, you don't have to do anything, don't worry about it. If it's your second or above, we'd really appreciate a like, a follow, a share. 5 stars on Spotify is really, really helpful. 5 stars on iTunes, 5 stars on, just Apple Podcasts, just generally all of the ones. Any sort of review or rating is absolutely ideal. We do have also a Patreon if you want to check out that. We have extra movie reviews, TV show reviews, and a new review is coming up probably next week. As we do a movie every single month, and this month we are going to be reviewing The Maze Runner, in which we basically go back to old movies, see how they still hold up. So yeah, that is all to come, but time to pretty much get into it because, as I said, we're going to be talking about one of the Clayfaces, Matt Hagen. Now, a lot of people, when they think of Clayface, they think of Basil Carlo. He's kind of probably the most famous one for good reason. But it's a really weird situation when it comes to the Clayfaces, only because they all kind of have morphed into each other over the years. Well, that's not a pun. I mean, like, their histories. So it's a really weird backstory, even by like Batman villain standards. But the name Clayface actually appeared in a comic book in 1940, super early on in Batman's history, and it applied to Basil Carlo, who is the first Clayface. And the story behind that was he was a film actor who was working in a horror movie, and basically then began to stalk actors on the movie set wearing a costume that basically was kind of very similar to Phantom of the Opera's costume. He had a clay-like makeup that he would use to sculpt his face, but it was entirely like a persona that he would put on. So he's not a big mud monster. It was just, he was the horror villain. He was Jason, or like he was Mike Myers. You know how it is, right? So it was a long time before the name appeared again. And as I said, Basil Carlo shows up. He's Clayface. He goes around killing all the other people that are working on the movie. And the idea, I think, is that he's killing them all one by one because they took his spot. It's like this is not Basil Carlo's report, so I haven't written too much about him because we can probably get into that when we do a report on him. But he comes along. He's just the usual murderer, just a run-of-the-mill murderer. You know how it is. So he then decides that name goes away, and an entirely new version of the character, which is the body sculpting monster that we all kind of know Clayface as, was introduced in 1961. This time with the alter ego of Matt Hagen. Now, obviously, this is the most famous one, and then what happened was, later years, like literally 40 years down the road, they bring Basil Carlo back, and then they give him the mud powers, because it was kind of like they did the idea with Basil, and then they landed on something with Matt Hagen, and then they were like, oh, that works really well for the actor who's like getting too old to do roles, so we should like give him the really horrible backstory. And they kind of just molded the two backstories together. So that's, a lot of people kind of think of Basil Carlo as having the mud thing as well because of the animated series, but Matt Hagen is really the first one that is kind of very similar to the original Clayface. So Matthew Hagen, also I should say, the original story was just he found a pool in a cave and rubbed his face in it and got turned into a mobster, or into a big monster. That was slightly changed in the 90s, and they added like a whole few extra characters into it that I will now go into. I've kind of got into it a bit more detailed origin of Matt Hagen, just because although I couldn't do the original is he just goes scuba diving and finds a big weird puddle in a cave. And I mean, that would take 5 seconds. I just kind of did it there. So, Matthew Hagen is a treasure hunter who made his living stealing goods and presumably fencing them off. And got a mob boss, Xylus, hired him basically to drop off a sack of stolen diamonds offshore on the bottom of a buoy. Hagen, however, planned to double cross the mob boss, and alongside his girlfriend Lisa, they were attacked by the goons. So the idea is he's been hired to do this job, he's going to double cross this mobster, and of course that never ends well. They were attacked by the goons, and Hagen dove into the Gotham Bay and surfaced inside a small underwater cave. So he's just basically trying to swim away for his life at this stage. Inside the cave was a small pool of special clay that Hagen fell into. So there's this weird fucking clay in the cave. And he falls into it, and the clay changed him into a being of living clay, capable of transforming into various shapes and retaining their powers. So he immediately gets the big mob monster. He looks slightly different. He's more like, he's not full, what's the word, like brown sludge monster. He's more like human melting. That's what he kind of looks like in these comic books. They do expand on that obviously as it goes on. But after Xylus's goons kidnapped Lisa, so Lisa gets kidnapped and they're like, where's Matt? Matt shows up and he attacks and kills them. Batman arrives on the scene to file the crime, only to be traumatized basically by the big monster that he's looking at killing all of the men. Even though they're crooks, Batman's like, holy shit, that's really vital. Now, I broke a little boy's spine the other day just to get information out of him, but even I'm like, holy boy, well, he's like breaking somebody else's legs to get more information. Hagen then decides, he turns up, he fights all the mob bosses, he kills everybody in the room, and then he takes Lisa to a cemetery where he reveals himself to her. He takes the name Clayface here, referring to his clay-like face, and the name had previously been used by the past Batman villain, but this was not connected at this point. It was mostly just, the guy has a melting face, we have a body part, and a characteristic, clay face, like flat head or something like that. So Lisa and Hagen hid out in an abandoned station while Hagen continued stealing treasures. So now that he has the powers, he goes out and he's like using them to commit more crimes to get some money so that him and Lisa can kind of run away. After about 2 days, he reverts back to normal Matt. He reverts back to human form, and he realizes that the powers only last 48 hours. So this is very like the Amazing Spider-Man with like Dr. Connors with the lizard. It only lasts a certain amount of time. And seeking the powers he had while he was Clayface, he returns to the cave and he goes back into it and gets the powers back. And this is a running feature of the character early on, in that he's not the Clayface monster all the time. He has to keep returning to the cave and putting his face in the puddle, and then eventually he gets the powers. Both Batman and Xylus eventually catch up to him, and Batman adopts the Matches Malone persona to seek information on him, which is one of my favourite things. Now, if you don't know who Matches Malone is, Bruce has this alter ego character that has a toothpick that like he looks like Bruce Wayne, but he has like a weird little mustache that someone would be like, oh, Bruce Wayne grew a weird small mustache. No. Gotham's most famous bachelor, completely hidden under the world's smallest little tail mustache. And then he has a little toothpick in his mouth. little hat, and he always talks in a weird accent that is definitely offensive to somebody. And he matches Malone, and he goes into crime areas and just tries to get information, and they never really guess that it's him, even though it's quite clearly Bruce Wayne. And so he does what it's a very big feature of like 40s to like 90s Batman. He's always matches Malone. Very much they kind of came across the point of it's weird that Bruce Wayne isn't recognised eventually, but you know, back then it was like classic noir. Our hero dresses up as like just a regular criminal just to kind of get the information. So he turns up, he's trying to get information out of everyone. Before he does, however, Hagen stops Lisa from leaving her. So Lisa decides at this point that she's not up for being with a man who's just basically moulding people into his body and smothering them to death. And I think that's a big red flag in a relationship. If your partner is turning into a big mud monster and then suffocating people by just picking them up and putting them in his stomach, I would leave. Now look, I don't want to tell you how to live your life and how to love. We love here. But if they're doing that, I would definitely go see somebody. Maybe just have a chat. Maybe talk to one of your friends. Is this a red flag? Not sure. But Lisa, it's the line for her. She's not happy with it. So she's like, I'm not into this. I'm going to go leave. And you can see where this is going because Matt's not happy that she wants to leave. So he picks her up and gives her a real big hug by smothering her in himself. So now they can be together forever. Isn't it romantic? I, for one, think it's romantic. Silas was killed by Hagen as well. So Silas shows up and he's like, finally got you, Matt. And Matt's like, actually, I have you. And he crushes his head with his body, or it's not quite sure whether he crushes his head or a grenade blows him up because Silas is holding a grenade at this point. But one of them kills him. He's double dead. It's death squared. And Batman's able to show up and he overcomes him using phosphorus bombs and knockout gas at this point. So that was the original Matt Hagen story of him showing up. He kills everybody. And Batman shows up and puts a stop to it. Hagen again appears in Detective Comics 304 in June 1962, posing as John Royce, and this is his new plan. So he gets out of prison, and the new plan is that he's going to basically become very rich socialites because he can turn into anything and anyone. That's Clayface's thing. The power of Clayface is that he can just mold his body into anything. He's a shapeshifter. And he decides that he's going to replicate rich people and go to the parties and get some idle gossip, maybe some information about where they keep their money, what their stuff is, what's going on. And using that, he then goes and commits robberies with all of the information he gets from all the members. Or like maybe someone says, oh, I'm going on holiday next week. We're going to Monaco for 2 weeks. Great. He just robs their house because he knows they're not there. Batman, uncovering the plot, eventually turns up and they have a big fight. And obviously Batman, it's an interesting thing with Clayface because Clayface he's super strong. So, like, that's completely different. Very unlike a lot of Batman villains in that he's super powered, really. Like, he's got superpower strength, superpower whatever. And then there's also a weird story thing early on is that whenever he replicates somebody, maybe a superhero, he actually gets their powers. Don't ask me how. So like there's a full story that I will touch on later where he actually gains all of Superman's powers by becoming Superman, turning his body into Superman. I don't know how that works. It was a story thing. They took it out of the story eventually, but it's something that once it pops up, you're like, that's definitely like world breaking, so we should probably get rid of that. But originally that was there. So Batman shows up and obviously a massive fight breaks out. It's always a big fight with these two because you just have Batman, regular dude, likes breaking spines. Clayface, no spine. no legs, can't break no boats, you can't harm him really. And so Batman's eventually able to overcome him using his other thing that he used. Other than phosphorus gas or bombs and knockout gas, he uses some freezing. He freezes them into suspended animation after a brief battle, which is another one of the classic ways he always defeats Clayface, is that if you freeze him, then the clay has nowhere to move, then you can take him away. 1 year later, however, Batman trails Hagen. So Hagen gets out of prison and Batman trails him to his cave, where Hagen receives his powers. Receiving the powers himself, in this storyline in the 60s, Batman gets the Clayface powers because he also sticks his head in the puddle. Don't ask. They just wanted the big face off between Clay Batman and Clayface. And so they have this big fight and Batman overcomes the villain again. So imagine like Matt Hagen's like, oh, I'm the best Clayface, and Batman shows up and it's obviously immediately better than him. Just real confidence knocker. Just what a dick Bruce is here. Taking his one thing, like he's got nothing else. Somebody killed his girlfriend, for God's sake. Now, we're not going to get into who killed her, but we know it was somebody. And we know it happened recently and she suffocated due to clay. Nobody, probably Basil Carlo did it. I think it was Basil. I think it was. So Batman shows up, he seals off the cave in this storyline, because obviously everyone's thinking it, Batman, why don't you just put a big wooden plank in front of the opening to the cave and then just like shut it down, or like just blow the cave up and then there's no more puddle and then you have no more Clayface. But 60s Batman is he's a simple kind of guy, and so he just seals it off. But crafty Hagen manages to stash away some of the protoplasm anyway, and with this he copies the protoplasmic jelly. I am saying all these words, but it's just the weird, you know how it is in comic books, the weird liquid that goes onto him to turn him into a thing. Classic comic book stuff. You got that weird, but it's always in a beaker, falls on our hero, suddenly they can run real quick. It's the classic Flash move. But he copies the protoplasmic jelly for chemistry studies, and he develops a way that he can use it to completely turn him, without having to go to the puddle. He can use the jelly to turn him into Clayface. The only drawback is that instead of lasting 48 hours, this one now only lasts 5 hours. So there's a lot of story ideas and story beats that you can hit with that he only has 5 hours. He's against the clock. If Batman can hold him out for long enough, eventually he turns back into Matt Hagen and you can get him back to jail. So there is some good plot points with that. Although if he's just Clayface all the time, he is very overpowered. Like, Clayface is such a cool character, but he's one of those where it's like, oh, Batman's definitely dead. Why does he not just pick him up and put him inside his stomach? Game over. So Clayface used his synthetic formula to start a new crime spree that would prove once and for all that he was superior to the Joker at this point. Him and Joker get into like this big long rivalry in the comic books in which they want to prove who's the best criminal in town, and Batman has to capture both of them at the same time. And it's during this time, however, he was confronted by Superman, and Clayface adopted Superman's appearance and his powers, which I think they must have written and were like, this will be good, and then very quickly must have realised, oh, this is a terrible idea, because now you've just given Clayface the powers to just copy everyone that he ever faces. So he could just become the Flash, or become, well, like, why would you never not become Superman? If you can just morph into Superman, just morph into Superman all the time and break Batman's spine. And maybe reverse psychology to spine breaking on the old bats, and then you get information out of him. So he had to be defeated by kryptonite. Like, Batman has to actually genuinely use kryptonite so that he gets all their powers and all their weaknesses as well. It's one of those where I'm not sure on that one, Chief, but we kind of touched on it, and then they've kind of got away from it a lot, and that he can... I don't mind him being able to look like Superman, but it is weird if he's also able to then just get his powers, because why would you not just constantly be Dame? Why would you be Clayface? If Clayface has the ability to be kind of strong, and you could just be Superman and lift a planet, why not just be Superman all the time? The situation gets under control with the kryptonite, and he's returned to prison. While in prison, however, he's visited by somebody called Preston Payne, a desperate scientist who wanted to learn the properties of Hagen's chemical structure. Now, Preston Payne is the sad one of the Clayfaces. To be honest with you, to me, they all seem pretty sad. Basil Carlo's not that sad to begin with, but then they retcon it to be a bit sadder. Hagen, I think, also, I suppose, isn't that sad. He's a criminal who just kind of got in with the wrong crowd, and he just found a weird puddle. Preston Payne is definitely the sad one, and within this, he's taken blood samples from Matt. And after taking the blood sample, Payne was able to develop a serum. But the chemical caused his body to become a source of infection that was highly contagious. And so he becomes a Clayface as well. He adopts the alias of Clayface the Third. Don't worry if you're trying to keep up with these Clayfaces. There's like 6 of them. There's always a new one coming, and they have one of the best names in comic books. When they came together after this, led by Basil Carlo, they were called the Mud Pack, which I just think is a great name for all the Clayfaces coming together. He was, sadly, Matt Hagen didn't really have that long a run, because I have a theory. Now, it's not confirmed, but my theory in comic books is this, that they wrote Matt Hagen, and then they realised that with Matt Hagen's look, with his power set and abilities, and then they take the history of Basil Carlo, who's a really fucked up character, who's an actor who just went insane because he was no longer right for the part that he was playing, you could mould the two of them together and create a really interesting character. So Hagen is ultimately killed by one of the Anti-Monitor's shadow demons during a massive story in the 80s called Crisis on Infinite Earth. So he's brought in like early 60s. When was his first appearance? Just scrolled up here. December 1961. And his last appearance is March 1986. So he's brought in for 25 years. And then I think they realise that there's probably more legs in Basil Carlo. And even with this, Basil Carlo actually shows straight back up originally afterwards and tries to bring Hagen back to life to make him part of the Mud Pack, but it's not successful. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about Clayface was because where we all a lot of us probably know Clayface from is the animated series. So Batman the animated series in the 90s did an amazing job with Clayface and really brought the character, like it brought it up another few levels. And by that I mean they kind of did like an amalgamation of what the comics were trying to do. They were screwed over by themselves in that, like, they had Basil Carlo in the 40s, then they had Matt Hagen, now they've got Preston Payne, they've got Tree. It's really messy, not just due to the clay, but just a general story. And whereas the animated series, they just morphed them all together into one guy. And he was named Matt Hagen, but he had the storyline of Basil Carlo. And it's one of the best, it's a 2-parter episodes. And it's 2 of my favourite episodes of the whole series. I would really recommend watching it. They are on Netflix as we speak. But the idea is that you have Basil Carlo, who is this actor who gets all this scarring, right? And Roland Daggett is this guy who basically comes up with a drug which can restore cellular scarring, which Hagen needed after an accident. So Matt Hagen is like this old actor. So like you can see how they've like basically given Matt Hagen Basil Carlo's identity, and it's like they've morphed it all together. It really it makes it a lot simpler. So in this, you just have Matt Hagen. He's this older actor. He's maybe losing his looks. And so he comes across this drug that can make him look younger. And then he gets into a car accident and he's even more like, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my whole life. Like, they're looking to fire me and replace me with somebody young. I'm not letting that happen. So he gets the drug and he starts putting it on his face, and he needs to use more and more of it. So it gets to the point of like, it's actually kind of like the plot of Catwoman, weirdly, if anyone remembers the plot of that. So the drug gets to the point where he's using it and it's fine, and then there's a day where he runs out and his skin starts to revert back to being like even more scarred and hideous, and he loses it completely. And so when Hagen arrives, Daggett basically orders to have him killed. So he cuts off Hagen, knowing he would return for more of his formula. So Daggett is like, I'm not selling you any more of it. Hagen obviously goes insane. He arrives at Daggett's place to be like, I want that formula. I'm an actor. I need that formula. And Daggett is this really rich guy who's, reminds me of the guy from Dopesick, like really bad dude. Obviously Dopesick man, actually a cunt, but this Daggett's a fictional character. Daggett orders him to be killed and they overdose him with the formula. So it's the classic thing of like, they inject way too much formula. Oh, you want the formula, do you? Well, you're going to really like this. So they inject him with all of the formula and they turn him into the big, massive Clayface monster. And there's it's like the best ending to the two-parter is the harrowing scene of like, Batman goes into the control room and puts like all of his different characters that he's played in all these different movies over the last 15 years on the screen. And Clayface's brain starts like overloading, and he's morphing into all of them because he looks at himself and he morphs into that, and he's just morphing into all of them consistently. And it's really like thought-provoking, like, who are you? Like, are you those characters or are you? What is your worth? Like, all this stuff. It's like a really psychologically great episode, which a lot of them tend to be a bit more darker, especially with the animated series. So definitely would recommend watching that if you're interested at all in why me and Shaun really like the Clayface character. Could not recommend those 2 episodes enough. As I said, they're only 20 minutes and they're on Netflix, so if you want to get involved in that before the Batman 2 comes out, because I think Clayface is the villain in that and it's going to be really good. So we'll finish off on powers and abilities. In terms of powers and abilities, he's got biofission. He can replicate his own cellular structure, basically creating a perfect duplicate of himself. So he can like break half of his arm off and create like a duplicate of himself. There is also an episode in the animated series where he creates a child with himself that lowers Robin away and lowers him into the sewage system. And it's like, because he only has enough to chop off one leg, and so he sends that leg out while he's dying in there. He's got metamorphosis, malleability, elongation. He can manipulate his physical features to make himself look like nearly anyone or anything. His only restriction appears to be limited volume of mass, so he can only replicate as much as he has. So he can't like become a skyscraper, but he can become someone pretty big just in terms of how much clay is there. Voice shifting as well. He can completely alter and mimic any individual. Natural weaponry. He can turn his arms into axes, swords, hammers. He can just turn his clay into whatever. And flight, which is what I think they don't really touch on a lot, but depending on his form, he's able to fly. In his first clash with Batman, he turned himself into a giant eagle and flew away. So, like, it really depends on what he becomes as well as part of the take. So, moving on to the other Clayfaces, a lot of them, 1 or 2 of them is good, and they are actually kind of part of the Bat family that they've helped protect Gotham using the Clayface powers. I just really like Clayface as just like this person who's just completely got off the deep end, and then he can either have 2 ways. Either he turns to crime, or he like tries to just like get retribution, or like make up for what he's done. So yeah, that is my report on Clayface. If I could do a report on any of them, because they're all pretty fun. 2 or 3 of them do, like, and I keep saying these are not puns, but they do kind of mold into each other is the thing, like they kind of the storylines run into each other a lot due to the mud pack and them all kind of being connected, and they all have to steal each other's blood to create the next round. There's even a story where Basil Carlo steals like the blood of Clayface 3 and Clayface 4 and then like becomes the ultimate Clayface. It's a whole thing. But yeah, if you like Clayface, maybe leave a comment. Spotify's going to ask you a question at the end of this. Mention a character you'd like us to do. We'll do all of them. It's fine. As I said, you can just tell one human being that we exist. You don't have to do anything else. That's absolutely fine. You can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, all the socials. And most importantly, just tell one human being that we exist. Just a one, please. So I have been Conor Lawler, and we shall see you all next week, guys. Bye.